Our childhood in Biscoe was wonderful. It reminds me of that play, Our Town, where if you walk through the graveyard, especially now at my age, I see all of these people who were part of my lives, including my parents. The reason we got to Biscoe, which is a tiny little town, in 1940 the census was 800 people. But there's a huge Carolina Power and Light substation there that feeds the factories and provides electricity for all those little towns in Montgomery County. My father was superintendent of the substation and operator of the substation, so that's how we got to Biscoe. We lived in the little four-room company house beside the substation, and the substation was on the edge of town, so we were, in a sense, isolated. And we had such wonderful parents that the fact that we were not town kids and couldn't see other children after school, we could, we turned one way and the town kids went the other way. We had a wonderful growing up time. My father and mother were superb parents. I always knew that my mother loved me. I mean, I can show you a passage in my baby book that I was the firstborn, so she had time to keep a baby book on me. And the other two, when they came along, they said, "Well, Mom, where's our baby book?" And she said, "If you have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and then one being born, you could only write one baby book." My mother grew up on a mill village in Rockingham. Her daddy worked for the mill, and she was a beautiful little blue-eyed blonde. She weighed 100 pounds when she married Daddy. She was only 5 feet 1 inch tall if she stretched herself way up. They had quite a love affair. I mean, they adored it. He loved her until the moment that he died. And she was very bright, and growing up, she was a fantastic cook. My mother, bless her heart, worked so hard. We 3 kids were her joy and really her reason for living, along with my father. My mother got a job in the lunchroom at school. She was in charge of the lunchroom, but she was also the major cook. So she made extra money for us that way. She would work 9 months during the school year. Then in the summertime, she would go to the Boy Scout camp down in Ellerby and do the same thing, feed all those scouts. And she worked so hard so that we would have extra. And with the extra stuff, it was for the extra income. We could afford a good secondhand car. We could afford a good secondhand piano. We could afford a trumpet for me, and I just can't tell you what she meant and how she sacrificed and how hard she worked. When I got to be a teenager and got my driver's license, and I would take the family car on a date, and I would come in, kind of late after my parents' bedtime. I'd come sneaking in, and the first thing I would do is go to the pantry, because there were always some great leftovers that my mother had placed in the pantry so that we could munch on later. And just about every night, I could hear her little feet, hit the floor, and she would come through the kitchen and into the pantry. And I would be eating some leftover fried chicken or whatever, and we would just have a good time chatting with each other in the pantry. And it was kind of a pantry party between a mother and a son. But she was a happy, wonderful mama, and loved us beyond anything you can describe, and loved my daddy to death. I mean, their love affair was so obvious to us. First of all, he was very handsome. He was 6'6", and that was back when that was unusual. In fact, when I was young, I never saw a man taller than my daddy. And I think my father sensed that, we were kind of isolated up there at the substation, and he would make things for us to play with. Like, one thing he would do is he made the best swings, rope swings in the world. We had lots of trees around our house. And he made the greatest rope swings in the world. But he could do anything. He made a merry-go-round for us one time by planting a stump of a tree and drilling a hole and putting a pipe in that, and then making a teeter-totter that we could whirl around in. And he was a great role model. He was such a good man. He was so good to everybody and respected everybody. I mean, you never heard him say anything disparaging about anyone. I mean, even a person considered the lowliest man in town, you would never hear my father say anything about them. I remember one Sunday, Daddy and I were walking home from church, and it was really cold. It was a really cold day. And this man was walking up the railroad track. And we were walking, we sometimes walked the railroad tracks to church and back. And the man, my father spoke to him, and the man said, "Mister, I'm out of a job. I wonder if you know there are any jobs in your town, anything that I could do." And my daddy said no, that he didn't. He was sorry that he didn't know of any jobs. And all of a sudden, my father had this thick wool overcoat, and he took it off. And this man was dressed kind of shabbily, and my father put that coat around his shoulders. And my dad just said, "You keep that, you keep that." And the man, tears welled up in his eyes, and he could hardly say anything. Because of my career, I've met really important people. I've met presidents, I've met royalty, I've met movie stars, entertainers. I have never met anyone as great as I think my father was. Never.